Howdy, my totally tubular game. We're back with another video.
The Legend of Zelda. I think we all know about this one at this point. But what about the Legend of Zelda spin-offs? Well, I don't think as many people are familiar on those, and so for today's video, we're going to be ranking every Legend of Zelda spin-off from worst to best. Aw yeah. Despite being around for over 35 plus years, the series actually has had a surprisingly few amount of spin-offs, with most of them showing up in the last 10 or so years. Despite Mario getting every spin-off under the sun, Nintendo's actually been pretty straightforward when it comes to Zelda. Usually it's just mainline game after mainline game, but that's not today's focus. No. We're going to be talking about those more elusive spin-offs. Thanks to the release of the latest Hyrule Warriors, I thought it was time to show these games some love. So, as always, we're going to be stacking these games up against each other, giving each one of them a little review, giving them their time to shine, seeing which ones are worth your time and which ones naturally are not. As per usual with my list, I'm only going to be looking at games released in North America, so all of those weird Tingle games or Japanese-only Zelda games aren't going to be here. I'm not looking at any mobile games. I don't even think there are any mobile games. We're not looking at any fan games or anything like that. And as I'm sure you're all aware, I'm a bit of a yapper, so move me to 1.5 speed, get the popcorn, get the Wendy's spicy nuggets, start the car up, start going to bed, continue grinding away at the 9 to 5. I've got plenty of things to say, and if you don't know that I'm a yapper, well, you might not be the most consistent viewer. So with that in mind, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Subscribing really would help me out. Seriously, thank you very much. 2016 is wrapping up, fellas, and I don't know if I'm ready for the new year. All the support is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you all so very much. This intro's gone on long enough. Let's get to the game. So, out of all the Zelda spin-offs, what's the weakest? It's probably pretty obvious.
Come back when you're a little, richer.
You already know that the worst Legend of Zelda games have to be the CDI games. We're just including all three together here. It doesn't really matter that they're of varying quality. They're the bottom three regardless, and are easily the worst spin-offs in the entire Legend of Zelda series. And it's probably why we didn't really get any Zelda spin-offs until like the mid-2010s when they were finally ready to try again. These three games are notoriously, infamously terrible by every stretch of the imagination. There is basically nothing good to say about these three games. Outside of these three games' cutscenes, which are just legendarily bad and really have become internet culture royalty at this point.
Link, and I will make your face the greatest in Korodai, or else you will die.
There are essentially no redeemable qualities when it comes to these three CDI games. Link the Faces of Evil and Zelda the Wand of Gamelon are incredibly similar 2D action games that are just straight up some of the most dreadful 2D games you'll find from the 90s, and that really is saying something. And then there's Zelda's Adventure, which is actually pretty different from the other two, but it doesn't really matter. It's still rather unenjoyable. It actually plays more like the original Legend of Zelda, but if they somehow made it much worse. And instead of the wonderfully animated cutscenes that the other two CDI games have, instead it's got FMV sequences. Ooh. Now with this in mind, I have played a decent amount of each one of them. I have not beat any of them, and that's because they were just fucking terrible. And to be frank with you, just kidding, I'm always going to be Jonathan, but to hypothetically be frank with you, I don't see them getting any better as I progress through them as well. The controls are absolute dog shit in all three of these games. The progression is just fucked. These games are cryptic. The level design is just straight up atrocious in all three of these games. They're incredibly buggy. There's just tons of glitches left and right, and are generally the opposite of enjoyable and fun. They're also pretty difficult thanks to the terrible controls and just how poorly they play. So not only am I, not enjoying myself whatsoever, but I also am getting pretty frustrated and annoyed at it, and it's to the point where I want to rip out whatever hair hasn't been transplanted to the front. But I certainly don't have the money for another Korea trip, so I'm just going to stop there and say that the CDI games are infamous for a reason. They are unbelievably terrible, and are so horrendous that I don't think anybody should ever play them. I think all of the cutscenes are 100% worth watching. Those are gold. The rest of the game is dog shit. And yes, I know that there were unofficial remakes of these that quote fix all of them. You can polish a turd all you fucking want. You can make it the shiniest turd on the planet, you still got a turd there. You know what was way better was Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore, which is more of a spiritual successor to the CDI games, but they did kind of fuck up with that one because they actually made a good game. Arzette is like 10 times better than these shitty CDI games. This is probably going to be the only time I ever talk about the Philips CDI or its games because watching a brick sit on the ground is more enjoyable and exciting than these.
Lamp oil, rope, bombs? You want it? It's yours, my friend, as long as you have enough rubies.
And so here we have Link's Crossbow Training, which released exclusively for the Wii in 2007. This might be like the weirdest Zelda spin-off of them all. This was essentially the pack-in title for the Wii Zapper. Remember when the Wii had a gun? Yeah, this was the game that came with it. But like a certain other Wii pack-in title, this game is actually pretty decent and way better than most people give it credit for. It's not just a simple little tech demo, no, it is a full-on rail shooter and it's one of the best ones to release on the Wii, and all these years later the game is surprisingly good. The game doesn't have a story, synopsis, or any real context why Link just goes on a rampage with his crossbow. Maybe he was just having a bad day, maybe it was Sunday and Chick-fil-A was closed and he decided to go to TGI Fridays for some reason. Either way, he's going to be shooting everything with that crossbow. With the game being the Wii Zapper pack-in title, it plays exactly like how you would expect, where you point at the TV and shoot accordingly, and it actually feels pretty decent. Even all these years later, it's still fun to line up and take the perfect shot, and there are plenty of satisfying moments. Now the game features 9 levels to it, and these 9 levels are split across 3 different gameplay styles. There is target shooting, where it is exactly what you would expect. You are shrimply shooting targets, and the closer to the bullseye you are, the more points you get. And if you shoot subsequent targets without missing, you'll start to get multipliers. While it does start out pretty easy, it eventually does become more difficult. There's the defender levels, where you are doing exactly that. You are stationary, just trying to defend an area, taking out as many enemies as you possibly can, and if Link gets hurt, you actually lose points, which is about as devastating to me as somebody using swear words on me. Please don't, I'm emotionally unstable. And then the ranger levels are actually pretty cool. You actually hook up the nunchunk, and you get to fully control Link as you go through 3 levels, including a siege on an enemy encampment, and you even get to fight through a forest. This is actually pretty sick and easily the most enjoyable game mode in this game. That or the multiplayer was always a fun little time. Now, even though I think the gameplay is pretty solid for the most part, the game certainly has its shortcomings. First off, the game can be completed in under an hour. It's very short, and while I think it is rather replayable, I don't think it's as replayable as plenty of other rail shooters. I'm not going to come back to this one like how I've come back to House of the Dead 2 many times. While getting more points and high scores is always going to have a certain appeal to it, I wish there was a little bit more in terms of variety and maybe choices you could make in these levels, like taking different routes. Just something a little extra thrown in there for more replayability. Additionally, while I think the controls are good for the most part, it certainly has its finicky moments. I mean, what Wii game doesn't? But for the most part, I thought it was pretty functional. When it comes to the game's presentation, yeah, it's very clearly Twilight of Princess, but without all the dark and the Twilight look. It looks fine, the music is fine, there's actually a few banger tracks in here, and I'd say that the music is a little underrated. I don't know if I would say that the game in general is underrated, but it's certainly forgotten. It's just one of those forgotten oddities from the Wii era that I never ever hear anybody talk about unless they're talking about like Zelda Spin-Off. But I will come in to say that this is a decent hour or 2 of fun, and if you've still got your Wii and you're looking for something cheap on it, you can't really go wrong with this. I'd love to see the game get re-released in some capacity, but I'm really not holding my breath on this one. And so here we have Cadence of Hyrule releasing for the Switch in 2019. This is one of the stranger Zelda games, and it's one of the few times Nintendo handed the keys to another studio, and it was actually an indie studio, Brace Yourself Games, the developers behind Crypt of the Necrodancer. And if you couldn't tell from this gameplay or you're just unaware, this is essentially Crypt of the Necrodancer with Legend of Zelda. Now, to be completely transparent, I haven't really played much of Crypt of the Necrodancer, but I saw this and went, ooh, Zelda, you know what, let's give it a shot. And it's actually pretty decent. When it comes to the gameplay, unsurprisingly, it is quite similar to Crypt of the Necrodancer. It is a top-down 2D roguelike rhythm game. It sees you playing as either Link or Zelda, and you're constantly switching between one of the two, exploring these randomly generated Zelda areas. And by Zelda areas, I mean like Hyrule Fields, the castle, Death Mountain, etc. But you'll be exploring around and moving to the beat. You can either move with the D-pad or a dance pad, funny enough. and will actually have to keep a rhythm here as you move across these tiles. But you're doing way more than just exploring around these little areas. You're collecting items, you're defeating enemies, and solving basic puzzles. And like I've already said, you gotta actually stay to the beat. You gotta keep a rhythm here. If you're somebody that has absolutely no rhythm, not a rhythmic bone in their body, where you've got as much rhythm as a brick in a puddle, well, you might have a bit of a challenge here. Thankfully, they do actually include a mode where you don't have to keep to the beat, but that kind of feels like you're destroying the purpose, the focus of the entire game. I really would not recommend playing on that mode. Speaking of keeping to the beat in the general gameplay, all these years later, I still think it's pretty unique. Yes, there have been plenty of rhythm games. There's been plenty of action games that are tied to rhythm games like Hi-Fi Rush, Metal Hellslinger, etc. But I feel like it all still comes together in a pretty unique way here. And I think that the Zelda flavor, Zelda frosting, the Zelda decorations, man, we're just having a Zelda party here, really help it stand out. It really certainly stands out when it comes to all the other Legend of Zelda games. There's not another Zelda game that is anything like this whatsoever. Funny enough, the game actually does have a story to it. It sees this new character known as Octavio rolling up and basically taking over Hyrule, and then it's up to Zelda, Link, and Cadence to stop him. The story's pretty basic, it's just kind of there, and it's more of an excuse for the game to be what it is. You're not coming to this game for the story, you're coming to it for the gameplay or the music. Speaking of, the music is really freaking good in this game. It really shouldn't come as a surprise that the rhythm game has great music, but every now and then the world does little things to surprise us. Sometimes peanut butter does not go with jelly. Sometimes Totally Tubular Jonathan does not go with Wendy's spicy nuggets. But if that happens, please call 911 immediately. Something has happened. Something is wrong. Siri, dial 911. We got a real fucking emergency on our hands. Anyway, the music's really freaking good. There's some incredible remixes of classic Zelda music. There's some new Zelda music in there. I got nothing but good things to say about it. The presentation in general is pretty good. Obviously, it looks a bit more basic than maybe what you're used to for a newer Zelda title, but it's also pretty much an indie game that just, you know, happens to be published by this little indie company known as Nintendo, who also may or may not be the richest country in all of Japan. But who's really counting there? At the end of the day, this is a fun little time that I have no problem recommending, especially if you like rhythm games. If you've never played Crypt of the Necrodancer, oh, you're in for a treat here. This is probably going to throw you for a loop. But if you're somebody who actually does enjoy Crypt of the Necrodancer and you haven't tried this, I don't know what you're waiting for. You should go check it out. Either way, it gets a thumbs up from me, and I think it was pretty cool of Nintendo to allow this to happen. And it makes for one of the more interesting Zelda spin-offs. And so here we have Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. This certainly is an interesting one. Now, I know that the original Hyrule Warriors didn't really have anything Breath of the Wild in it since it came out before, but I don't think most people expected to get a second Hyrule Warriors that was exclusively Breath of the Wild. And then I was equally surprised when we got a third Hyrule Warriors that's exclusively Tears of the Kingdom. I'm just a surprised little guy over here. But anyway, when it comes to this game's story, things certainly are perplexing, to say the least. It actually takes place before Breath of the Wild and is about Zelda, Impa, Link, the champions, all of them trying to prevent the revival, the return, the rebirth of Calamity Ganon. But there's also a bunch of time travel shenanigans thrown in here, and yeah, the story's just kind of a mixed bag in this game. I was pretty iffy on it before the game even came out, but after playing through this, yeah, to be 100, I didn't really enjoy it all that much. I didn't like the direction the story takes, and I feel like it doesn't really enhance the world, the lore, or characters of Breath of the Wild. There's no meaningful character development, they didn't expand the world. This game's just kinda there, and it's not even canon. I think I speak for a lot of people where we were kind of expecting a Star Wars Rogue One situation, and this game just goes for a completely different direction. And while I know there are plenty of people that enjoy the story to this game, I just wasn't really into it. Then again, I've never really been into Breath of the Wild story either, so maybe this is just a me issue, and maybe I need to just move on. I mean, it is a Warriors game after all. How many people are actually playing this for the story? When it comes to the moment-to-moment gameplay, it is exactly what you would expect. It is very similar to the original Hyrule Warriors in several aspects. You're still moving across a relatively large battlefield, wiping out hundreds, thousands, if not dozens of enemies, capturing points and taking on the occasional boss. There are plenty of key differences between the original Hyrule Warriors and this though. Like I've mentioned more than once now, this is only based off of Breath of the Wild. If you jump into this expecting to see Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask or Tingle or Morshu or literally anything from any other Zelda game that is not not Breath of the Wild, you, my friend or enemy who is hate watching me, have set yourself up for failure. But hey, if you're somebody who absolutely loves Breath of the Wild to pieces, and I know there are a fair amount of y'all, then I think you'll really enjoy this game's cast of characters, the environments, the weapons, and just general fan service. You even get a bunch of the tools and cool shit from Breath of the Wild, and now it's completely recontextualized, like the Sheikah Slate and all of its fun abilities. And the paraglider. Okay, the paraglider isn't really recontextualized, but now you can get across the battlefield in a different way. But speaking of the battlefield, if you couldn't tell, it very much still has that Dynasty Warriors DNA. Despite having that Zelda frosting, despite having that Breath of the Wild icing, and despite having that Sheikah Slate sprinkles, you are still just mowing down everything in sight. Oftentimes you're pretty much just wiping out everything that can move. You'll be doing plenty of the hacking and the slashing. But you know what? It's actually pretty damn fun in this game. The combat actually is rather enjoyable, and it's some of the best combat you'll find in any Warriors games. I will say, over the years, the Warriors games have gotten a hell of a lot better with their combat. Not only do the characters actually feel different from each other, but there's a fair amount of depth here. The combo chains go quite a bit deeper than the normal Warriors title. All of the characters have their own little abilities, pros, cons, etc. They all have skill trees and can be leveled up, and of course they've got big satisfying moves that send enemies flying, and the enemies absolutely react in the way that you would want them to. And seeing all of the Sheikah Slate abilities being recontextualized exclusively for combat is pretty cool also. Needless to say, I think the combat is actually satisfying in this game, it's enjoyable, and it's what you're doing like 90% of the game. You're also completing these rather basic objectives, but those are really just there for you to, wipe out dozens of more enemies. This game's got weapon crafting and upgrading. Thankfully, it doesn't have the weapon durability from Breath of the Wild. There's cooking. Yeah, there's a bunch of little wrinkles thrown in here to keep the game from getting stale or repetitive. And this game absolutely needs that. It needs those wrinkles, bruh. I can't really think of many scenarios or contexts where wrinkles would be good, but this is one of them because this is a pretty big game. There's a giant world map with tons of objectives. There's actually a lot of side content, and you're gonna be here for a while. It doesn't go absolutely bonkers crazy insano sicko mode like the original Hyrule Warriors did, but you're going to be here for a substantial amount of time. So all of the variety is more than welcome here because the game does start to get repetitive. It does try to mix things up from time to time where you actually get to control the divine beasts, and these are pretty fun too. Yeah, they're absolutely mindless where you're just wiping everything out, but I mean, playing a Warriors game and complaining that it's mindless is like jumping into a pool and complaining that you got wet. Like genuinely, honestly, what did you think was going to happen? At least you can have some fun in the pool, and you can have some fun in this game. I certainly did. I've always been a fan of the Warriors games, so maybe I'm more dispositioned to like this game, but I found it to be pretty entertaining. I do have a few gripes with it, like I mentioned, because it is so long, it does start to get a bit stale and repetitive. I already brought up the story, and the presentation, I'll just be blunt about it, it really leaves a lot to be desired. I have not tried it on Switch 2, but on Switch 1, man, this game just chugs at times, and it doesn't even look that great. I'd say graphically it's on the same level as Breath of the Wild, but at times the game just becomes an absolute slideshow, running at like 10, maybe 15 FPS, especially when there's a lot of explosions or enemies on screen. And Dynasty Warriors games having frame rate issues is about as new as 9/11. But come on now, this can get so choppy that it really interferes with my entire experience. But despite all that, I still do recommend the game. If you're somebody who enjoys the Warriors series, you're going to enjoy this. If you're somebody who likes Breath of the Wild, you've probably already played this, but if you haven't, it really is a no-brainer. And even with its flaws, I have no problem saying that this is one of the better Warriors games overall. And even though I would say it's the weakest of the three Hyrule Warriors games, it still has a lot to offer. And then here we have the latest Legend of Zelda spin-off and the latest Hyrule Warriors with Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. Now, I was even more surprised to see a third Hyrule Warriors, but after putting a fair amount of time into this one, I gotta say, it's actually pretty good, and I do prefer it over Age of Calamity. So this game takes place before Tears of the Kingdom. I really don't want to spoil things here, but I will just say somehow Zelda ends up going back in time to the imprisoning war that is depicted in Tears of the Kingdom, and it's up to her to figure out how to get back to her own time and how to stop Ganondorf. I'll just immediately say that the story is actually pretty decent in this game. It is way better than I thought it would be, and it's much better than what Age of Calamity had. First off, it's canon. It's actually very much in line with the Tears of the Kingdom story, and it really shows what Zelda was doing in the past, and I actually found this to be quite fascinating. The game very much does follow the plot beats that happen in Tears of the Kingdom, and if you've played all the way through Tears of the Kingdom, then you're pretty much already going to know what happens, but the way that they get there isn't exactly how you would expect. The game actually does introduce a number of original characters, and some of these are actually pretty cool, with the show stealer easily being this badass little Korok that's just trying to become a tree. I really liked him, and he always stole the show every scene he was in. But there was more than just him. There's a number of other cool characters that show up here. It's more than just Zelda and Ronru, but they're also great too. I'm not going to act like this is award-winning stuff here. It's not going to be challenging Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2 or Cyberpunk 2077. It doesn't even really match Tears of the Kingdom in terms of emotional moments, but I still found the story to be rather endearing. It was nice to come back to the world of Tears of the Kingdom, and I found it engaging throughout, and seeing more of Ganondorf is never going to be a bad thing. We love our Gerudo King. So alright, they did a good job with the story, but what about the gameplay? Well, it's pretty much what you would expect from a third Hyrule Warriors game. It does play pretty similarly to the Dynasty Warriors games. It really is still a collaboration between Dynasty Warriors and Zelda. But you know what? I'm still having fun with these games. It doesn't matter that this is the third Hyrule Warriors. It doesn't matter that this is like the 50th or 60th Warriors game in general. I'm still having a good time here. I know some people would rather dive into oncoming traffic than play these games, but at this point I'm convinced that I'm pretty much going to like Warriors games for life. But what does this game do that makes it a little different from the other Hyrule Warriors games? First off, the character roster is pretty different. Zelda really is the main character here, and while there are other characters that show up, for the most part these are all original. There's no Link, there's no Impa, there's really no characters from Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild. For the most part, it is original characters here, and they all play rather differently from each other. This game actually does a really good job at distinguishing each character and making sure that no two characters feel alike, and some of them actually feel completely different from any characters from legit any other Dynasty Warriors game, spin-off or otherwise, and it was pretty cool how unique some of these felt. Yes, at the end of the day, the moment-to-moment gameplay really isn't all that different from what you've been doing for a very long time now. You're running around rather large battlefields, usually going from point to point, capturing areas, defeating mini-bosses, the occasional big boss, and wiping out waves and waves of enemies. You can, of course, just kind of button mash your way through, but the game is a lot more fun if you want to learn its systems, combos, and how everything comes together. And they've really thrown a Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom twist into everything. Like, you wear enemies down, you can break their guard, you can actually use a bunch of the Zonai devices that showed up in Tears of the Kingdom, the one that required the batteries, you know, those crazy creations people were making. Yeah, a bunch of that can be used for combat here. I actually thought this was really cool and a unique way to utilize this, and it allows you to have a bunch of unique attacks that you would never be able to do otherwise, like pulling out a giant cannon, shooting fire, riding a rocket. There's actually a bunch of things you could do here, and there is a fair amount of variety when it comes to these. It doesn't get anywhere near as creative as Tears of the Kingdom. You can't just mix and match a bunch of these to have some unique combinations, but it's still pretty cool. And it adds a fun little twist to things. There's also some big countering moves. You can counter pretty much every big move an enemy does in this game. I think that was a cool little twist. It doesn't feel as good as, say, the parrying from Dynasty Warriors Origins, but it was fun to counter these enemies. And then the game also has a bunch of fun team-up moves that allow you to do some serious damage. These just show up from time to time. You press a button and boom, big damage time. And all of this comes together to create a pretty satisfying, fun experience throughout. If you're somebody that doesn't like the Warriors games, this certainly is not going to change your mind. Like, it does not even try to do that. But if you're someone who's even like passively into these games, I think the gameplay is going to jive with you. I will say there is at least one new gameplay style. There are these rail shooter areas where it actually plays more like Star Fox, and I found these to be a good diversion. It added variety and a good change of pace. However, when you're looking at the overall picture of the gameplay, is it the most original? Is it the most predictable? Yeah, it's about as predictable as Christmas coming this year. But hey, as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and they really didn't change the progression of this game from the last Hyrule Warriors. You're still on the big map screen, you can still do these little side quests where you give materials, and there's also plenty of optional battles to partake in as well. When it comes to content, this isn't as content heavy as some of the other Hyrule Warriors games. You can finish it in around 11 or 12 hours. If you just stick to the main story, you'll probably be a bit under leveled, but that's really not the end of the world. But if you do even a little bit of the side content, it'll probably take you around 15 hours to finish this one. So no, it isn't absolutely gargantuan when it comes to content, but on the flip side, that also means that it doesn't really have much of a chance to truly get repetitive and stale. I mean, if you're already sick of these games, it's going to be stale right from the get-go, but if you're not, I think the game's general length, pacing, and progression will keep you engaged throughout. There's plenty of RPG elements thrown in and little unique wrinkles here and there to keep it fresh throughout. Something I do want to give a major shout out to though is the game's presentation. Yeah, it looks pretty much the same as Tears of the Kingdom, which might not exactly be the most impressive for a big new first-party Switch 2 game, but the key thing I want to highlight here is the frame rate. The frame rate is actually really great in this game. I didn't really see like any issues at all. Smooth 60, easily the smoothest Hyrule Warriors of them all. The presentation through and through I thought was pretty stellar. Outside of the music, that was a little disappointing. There were some cool remixes here and there, but of the three Hyrule Warriors, I thought this was the weakest. Musically, that is. But let's wrap things up. I think this is a pretty good one. If you're somebody that really enjoys Tears of the Kingdom, especially the story, this one really is a no-brainer. If you're somebody that likes Warriors games or you like the previous two, you're gonna like this one as well. $70 is pretty pricey, and it is a bit of a tough pill to swallow. Even though I actually quite enjoyed this game and would say that it's one of the best Warriors games overall, I'd still probably say wait for a sale, but this is Nintendo we're talking about, so it going on sale is about as likely as me going outside and being able to dodge rain in a thunderstorm. It's not gonna happen. Long story short, if you like Zelda, this one's worth playing. But then here we have it. It's probably no surprise that when it comes to the Legend of Zelda spin-offs, I think the best truly is the original Hyrule Warriors, the Switch version to be exact, which was titled the Definitive Edition, and it truly is the Definitive Edition. I actually got this game on Wii U when it came out. I was super excited for it. I was like, wow, Dynasty Warriors and Zelda, this is so cool, and I played the shit out of it on Wii U. Then I saw it was on 3DS, checked it out a little bit on there, didn't really play too much of it, but then when I saw it was coming to Switch, I was like, you know what, I actually really love Hyrule Warriors, I'm getting this again. So yeah, I've played quite a lot of this game, and I would say that it's up there as maybe my favorite Warriors game of them all. Like, truly, it is one of the very best, and maybe the best Warriors spin-off period. But now that all of the initial glazing and Jonathan history is done, you might be going, okay, what makes this game so good? Why is it the best Zelda spin-off? Why is it one of the best Dynasty Warriors games? A few reasons. The game is just a huge love letter to The Legend of Zelda. It was clearly made by people who are fans of the source material, and it's for the fans. It takes place in a non-official, non-canon Zelda timeline. It sees Ganondorf being resurrected thanks to this new original character known as Sia and just trying to take over. It's pretty shrimple. But in doing so, he opens the Gate of Souls, which is essentially a portal to different time-space realities of Hyrule. And what this basically means is that a bunch of fan favorite characters and villains are able to show up in the same timeline, and of course at the same time. So yeah, it's got plenty of fan service. It's not just focusing on like Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time or Skyward Sword or any of that. It's all of them. It's all of them combined. So a bunch of the fan favorite characters roll out, all of the villains show up. The game does its best effort to really just have as many callbacks and throwbacks to older Zelda games as possible. And you know what? That's totally fine with me. Is the story a bit all over the place? Is it a little nonsensical at times? Do the new OCs not really fit into the Zelda whatsoever? Yes, yes, and yes.
Great! I'll grab my stuff!
But does this really matter all that much? Like, at the end of the day, all of this really is just an excuse to bring all of these fan favorite Zelda characters together. If you want the best story in a Hyrule Warriors game, check out Age of Imprisonment. But if you want the most fun story, oh, it's this game by a landslide. It is so cool to see all of these characters come back. It's so cool to see all of them rendered in HD, and while they don't have the same character arcs that they had in the original games, and plenty of people might just go, oh, they're just nostalgia baiting, this is low-hanging fruit, they got you. Well, I'm happy either way. The story, writing, and general dialogue really isn't anything special here. It's not great, to be honest, but the story does what it needs to do here, and the definitive edition actually adds this extra little story with Linkle, and this isn't great, but it's there, it's actually optional, and I wouldn't say that it hurts the overall game. Now when it comes to the gameplay, it is real shocking stuff here. Pretty similar to the Dynasty Warriors series, but it has a really good Legend of Zelda flavor over it. And to clarify, I mean old Legend of Zelda, pre-Breath of the Wild. Yes, the core gameplay loop is still you running around these larger battlefields, wiping out hundreds, thousands, dozens of enemies, taking over points, fighting mini-bosses, and sometimes large creatures. And if you've ever, and I mean ever, played a Warriors game, you're immediately going to know how this game is structured, how all the battles play out, and what you need to do in them, but I think all of these Zelda twists and turns that they throw in here are actually pretty cool, and they're different from the other Hyrule Warriors games, since it's based on, the older Zelda games. There's the bombs, there's the boomerangs, there's the hook shot, there's all the many weapons that show up throughout the Legend of Zelda series, and they all get utilized in pretty unique ways. Obviously, the game has a heavy emphasis on combat, but I'll always find it pretty entertaining to see all of these Zelda characters, weapons, environments, really everything just being recontextualized into a warrior setting. And I remember thinking in 2014 that this shit was so cool, and all these years later, I still think it is pretty awesome. Like, the other Hyrule Warriors games are cool, but this one, it really just hit different. You wipe out so many enemies in this game, way more than the other Warriors games. And it feels so good in this game. Even though the game is 10 plus years old, I think this is still one of the most satisfying Warriors games throughout. There's a bunch of characters, and while they don't all feel crazy different from each other, they all still feel really powerful. And speaking of the characters, that's another area where this game absolutely shines. While the story mode only puts the spotlight on a certain number of characters, there's actually way more characters to play as in this game, more than any of the other Hyrule Warriors games, and man, some of these are some deep cuts, playing as Skull Kid, as the other Links, Beast Ganondorf. Like, it's actually pretty crazy, and there's such a high attention to detail to these characters. There's a bunch of little throwbacks and traits and nuances to the older Zelda games, and if you've played the older ones, oh, you're gonna be just popping off the whole time. And it just makes the combat all the more engaging and all the more fun, and you're just kind of waiting to see what game they'll reference next, what obscure Zelda reference will show up. And the game really doesn't disappoint, and when it comes to this game's content, it is unmatched, it is unrivaled, it is unparalleled. Like, this game has a stupid amount of content to it. The main story mode will take you well beyond the 15-20 hour mark, but that is just scratching the surface. This game features adventure mode, in which you actually get to explore an entire map based on the original Legend of Zelda, and each square gives you objectives, and when you complete these objectives, you actually get to uncover the map and its secrets. And this, you'll be on this for ages. This game has just a silly, a goofy, a foolish amount of content. Like, you could play well over 100 hours thanks to the adventure mode alone. It's truly one of those games that are a bang for your buck, and it's so much fun. Yes, eventually it's going to start to get stale, it's going to get repetitive. This kind of gameplay doesn't really lend itself to a 100-hour plus game, but what's great is pretty much all of it is optional, so if you just want to beeline the main story, you're not going to be here too long. But if you get into it, oh, you can really get into it, and the game absolutely has plenty for you to do. And what's nice is that it actually runs pretty well also, and it still looks nice even today. Sure, it's not going to wow you, and it doesn't have the crazy nice art style that, say, Tears of the Kingdom has, but I like how it looks. The music though, oh, that shit goes foolish. There is so many good remixes of Zelda music. Like, it is the best music of the Hyrule Warriors games. It is so good. I love the music to this game. There's so much good shit. If you couldn't tell, I'm just kind of a big fan of this one. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It still is a Warriors game at the end of the day. You're still just mowing down waves and waves of enemies, and that's not everyone's cup of tea. Some characters are clearly way better than others. Ganondorf is just way too fucking good in this game, and whenever the game throws in elements from Zelda that aren't tied to the combat, like basic exploration or puzzle solving, it really doesn't come together. But These aren't deal breakers by any means. I have absolutely no problem recommending this game, especially if you like Zelda or Dynasty Wars. If you're somebody that likes Zelda, then you really ought to check this one out. Like, it is a actual love letter to this series. It's probably one of the best gaming love letters I've ever seen. There's just such a high attention to detail. There's so much care and love for this franchise. Like, it's really impressive. And at this point, I'm just kind of convinced that I'll always think this is the best of the Hyrule Warriors games. If we somehow get a fourth one, I doubt it's going to be able to touch just how awesome and epic this first one was. If I could only recommend one game to you today, it's going to be this one. Not even close. You should go check it out if you like this kind of game. If you don't, well, I don't know why you made it to the end of the video, but I really appreciate you. Seriously. Thank you all so very much. And if you made it to this part of the video, well, you can comment our secret code word. Our code word today is going to be Tingle, my favorite green spandex wearing character person, whatever the fuck he is. I don't know, man. Tingle's always been a weird one, but we're going with Tingle. Stay safe, y'all. I'm heading to bed. See y'all later. Bye-bye.